Oh, hey there. I'm going to explain to you how interest rates work and why this really matters to you. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go on a journey together back in time, and I'm going to explain to you how interest rate policy has worked since 1980 or so. All right, so let's go back in time. All right, we're back in the 1980s, and there's a guy named Volcker that was in charge of changing interest rates in the United States back then. This is ridiculous. Let me change. This is not how I looked like back then. Let me change this. All right, that's more like it. All right, so back in the 1980s, there was this dude named Volcker, and he was the Federal Reserve chairman as appointed by Jimmy Carter and then Ronald Reagan as well. Sorry, I can't do this. I'm trying to play the part, act the part's not working, sorry. And what happened was in the early 80s, the prices of everything was moving up rapidly in the United States. And the only way to lower prices of pretty much everything is to raise interest rates and make it more expensive to get money. And I remember this because I lived in Canada at the time, spiderweb or something there, sorry. I lived in Canada at the time, and in Canada you cannot deduct the interest on your mortgage. And interest rates were about 20%. My dad had a 20% mortgage. It was stressful. He managed really well. It was amazing. I could not do that. So, but let me explain to you what inflation means, what interest rates are, and how they're manipulated by governments and why. Okay, and if you want, you could stick around with me till the end. There's going to be one more movie reference. Let's see if you can guess what it is. Okay, all right. So let me first of all explain to you how interest rates work and why governments raise and lower interest rates. But I'm going to use avocados as an example. Okay, so let's say that you go to the grocery store and avocados are 50 cents each. Okay, which is an amazing deal. They're obviously not that low today. They're really, really cheap. And all of a sudden, there's a big shortage, and there's a drought or something, and farmers can't grow these things as much. So we're left with fewer avocados. So we go to the grocery store, and we try and buy these things, and all of a sudden, the price is $3 per avocado, hypothetically speaking. That's because there are fewer avocados available. The supply of avocados went down, and the demand stayed constant. Okay, and so the price went up. Now that we understand that, I'm going to teach you the same concept when it comes to real money. Okay, so let me do it this way. Let me first of all explain what governments use interest rates for. Okay, it's to, of course, stimulate the economy if you cut interest rates, and to slow down the economy if they raise interest rates. But let me explain what interest rates are often for. Okay, so a lot of governments don't make enough money through tax revenues to fund things like bridges, wars, God forbid, and that sort of thing. So what they do, because tax revenue is not enough, is they issue bonds. Okay, and this here is a real bond. It's not worth anything. It's from 1945, and it was a war savings bond. And of course, the American government used this for World War II. And you can find all these things on eBay for next to nothing. Here's one from the Russian government from 1917, of course, to fund World War I. Here's one from a railroad company in New York with a bunch of coupons you can clip off to fund the building out of the railroad system years ago. And here's an international one that I love. So my dad's from Egypt. This one is from the Egyptian government in 1898. It's written in French, and it's in pounds sterling, and it was used to build like the Suez Canal or a dam, something like that. Anyway, so what happens is governments will entice you to buy those bonds so that they can use the proceeds to do things like build bridges only, and unfortunately do things like declare war. So what they do is this. So let me get the U.S. savings bond as an example. So the American government needs money. We're back in 1945. I was not born then, okay? And so what happens is the American government wants you, the consumer, I'm the government, okay? I'm in charge of interest rates. I'm actually the Federal Reserve chairperson, okay? That's appointed by the President of the United States to change interest rates. In Europe, it's called the ECB, or European Central Banker. In Canada, it's the Bank of Canada, etc. Okay, so it's 1945. I'm the U.S. government, and I need to pay for supplies to go to Europe for war. Unfortunately, it is what it is, right? Which is pretty heroic and noble at the time, of course. But so what happens is this. I want you, the American consumer, or any consumer all over the world, to buy this bond, okay? And what happens is when you buy this bond, right? You basically, I give this to you and you give me your money, okay? And this is hundreds of millions of dollars, all pretend money, obviously. Okay, so this is yours now. And there's a higher interest rate on this than you normally would see in the bank. So of course you buy it, and it's patriotic too. Okay, so you bought it. I'm the government. I use some of the proceeds, okay, to pay for items for the war. And this money is now taken out of circulation, okay? Now there's less money out there in circulation, right? The supply went down a lot because the government has it, and they took it out of circulation, just like avocados. And so what happens to money? That's right. The price of money goes up. That's how interest rates go up. That's exactly how it happens, except it's through what's called an FOMC meeting, or a Federal Open Market Committee meeting, which is every couple of weeks. And so that is exactly how it's done. Now, what can happen is when the government wants more money to be out there in supply to lower the price of money, what they do is they buy back that bond and they give this money to the consumer, okay? As much as they want or as little as they want, whatever. Enough to make interest rates go down. And that's a good thing because what happens is when interest rates go down, the economy improves a lot, okay? It really helps people because when interest rates are lower, people will get more loans and they'll start more companies and they'll feel better about themselves. They'll buy another house, they'll buy a car, they'll finance it, that sort of thing. Okay, so let me talk about, I took you to the 80s. We talked about inflation in the 80s. Let me take you to the 90s now, okay? And we'll talk about 2008, what happened then. It was deadly. We were within 24 hours of bank machines not working then. So back in, I remember it was 1998, and I worked at Goldman Sachs. I was a grunt. I was an intern. I didn't know anything. I still don't. And I was on the trading floor. And there was a surprise interest rate hike by Alan Greenspan. And this was in September, I think, of 1998, or maybe it was October, I can't remember. And the whole trading floor went up and went crazy, and they were trading like crazy. And a lot of clients were buying and selling shares of whatever companies they owned through Goldman Sachs trading floor. And this happened on trading floors all over the world. And so the Federal Reserve chairperson at that time, as appointed by Bill Clinton, was Alan Greenspan. And Alan Greenspan had made that surprise rate decision. And that's why everybody is glued to everything that the Federal Reserve chairperson says whenever she or he speaks on TV. That was fascinating. It was fascinating. Now, let's go to 2008. 2008 was a really, really scary time. And we were within 24 hours of bank machines not working. And what happens is when times are good, Federal Reserve chair people or the European Central Bank or the Bank of Canada, et cetera, or the Minister of Finance in other countries, what they do when times are good is they raise interest rates, okay? And the reason they raise interest rates is so that they can have a couple of bullets in the gun, so to speak. I hate using that analogy, but I will. So that they can jumpstart the economy later, right? So say the economy is not doing well and interest rates are currently 8%, hypothetically speaking. What they can do, the government can do, is they can cut interest rates. And the Federal Reserve chairperson or the Bank of Canada or the ECB, if you're in Europe, will announce a rate cut. And the markets will love it. The stock market goes up usually because what happens is if money is cheaper and the interest rate is lower, people will borrow more money and invest in stocks, especially hedge funds that like to lever up. They overdo it sometimes though. So what happened was in 2008, I think we're all lucky that Ben Bernanke was the Federal Reserve chairperson. Okay, he was amazing. And we're lucky because, and this is controversial and people will hate that I say this, but we're lucky because he actually did his PhD at Princeton. PhD stands for plumbing, heating, and dishwashing, by the way. Okay, sorry, that's dad humor. But he did his PhD at Princeton years ago. And he did it and he studied depressionary economics. And that's an important thing because we almost went into another Great Depression. 2008 was so bad. And what happened was this, things were really, really bad. And so the government, in order to try to stimulate the economy, they cut interest rates by firing a bullet, meaning spark jumping the economy by lowering rates, okay? And so think of it like it's a gun. You've got a bunch of bullets, and I hate to use that analogy, sorry, but think of it like a gun. You got a bunch of bullets in the chamber, and every time you fire one, it stimulates the economy. And so what happened was they tried that in 2008. Things were just terrible. They cut rates because, you know, when rates go down, people will spend more money on cars and things, which helps the economy. And so they did it again. They cut rates again, and they were shocked. It didn't work. It didn't work. And so they cut rates again. Rates were almost at 0%. They cut them again. Oh, didn't work. Didn't work at all. I got a big mess to clean up. That's okay as long as I'm helping you learn something here at my expense. Laugh at me, not with me. But it didn't work. It didn't work. And they had nothing left to do that could stimulate the economy because they ran out of bullets. They ran out of bullets. And so what they actually did was Bernanke, thank goodness, he again did his PhD in depressionary economics because he understood what could happen to the economy. So what he did was he got together with the Treasury Secretary, Geithner at the time, and they urged the President of the United States to create these massive programs that would help stimulate the economy because they couldn't cut interest rates anymore. It was really, really scary, man. And nobody can get loans. Nobody can get loans. And so what they did was this. They started doing what's called Clash for Clunkers, which sounds ridiculous. It kind of was, where they would buy old cars from people. And that would put more cash in people's pockets, and so they were supposed to spend money. They didn't. And so what happened was the government then bought $700 or $800 billion worth of troubled treasury or troubled securities as part of what was called Treasury Asset Research Repurchase Program, TARP. And that put $700 to $800 billion into the banks. And the bank still didn't lend us. And I remember I was begging Wells Fargo to help me refinance my mortgage, and they wouldn't give in. And my neighbor in Burlingame, California, foreclosed on their house on this side, and the other side, they foreclosed as well. This touched everybody in America and all over the world as well. And finally, I went to Wells Fargo, and I begged and begged and begged. I literally got to have my knees. And God bless you, Wells Fargo. They actually gave me a loan, which was great. But it was catastrophic. It was catastrophic. And now I understand why the government's raising interest rates now. And I know that certain politicians don't agree with it. But I think it actually makes some sense. Because, and I know it's painful for all of us, right? Because the market's down this year now. But and I recorded this as of late 2018. But if the government doesn't, put more bullets back into the gun to stimulate the economy in the future when things are really bad, like really bad, then we won't be able to get out of that next economic recession. And no matter what anybody tells you, business is always cyclical. Boom, bust, rinse, lather, repeat. 10-year cycles usually. Okay. And the only way to get us out of the next major recession is by cutting interest rates. And it's a good thing that the Federal Reserve is kind of a separate entity. I'm not going to get political on you. I think you understand what I'm saying. But it's not just the Federal Reserve that thinks this way. The Bank of Canada does, the Minister of Finance in other countries, European Central Bank as well. Okay, they're very, very long-term focused, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. And of course, it is very controversial. Now, I told you I would have one more movie Easter egg in here. You're gonna have to guess what movie this comes from, and I'll do it in a minute, okay? And what I'll do is I'll put up a voting system in the top right-hand corner, and you can vote on what this next movie thing I'm gonna show you in a minute is. But before we go there, I wanna talk about money. And this is one of the worst investments you can ever make, ever, okay? You think if you owned, look at this hasn't changed in years. This is from the early 90s. Isn't that crazy? Look at this one here. I got this one here. It looks identical. This is actually from 1957. And they all look like this back to the 1930s as well. And it didn't look that different in 1917 either, or in 1898. And you think this is worth a lot. It's not. It's not. And this reminds me of that game, Red Dead Redemption 2, which I'm hooked on right now, 1898, same year. But it's amazing. It's not worth much. And I've got another one from you, and this will blow you away. Okay, I was in Jerusalem with my family a year or two ago, and I got a coin from the year 30 AD, the year 30. And you think it'd be worth a lot? It's not. Why? Because the Roman Empire almost went belly up because they made too many of these things. And so governments have a big control and too much control in terms of what your money is worth. And it got really problematic even in places like Zimbabwe. It was really sad. In 2008, the government kept printing more money to try and get Zimbabwe out of that economic recession. And the inflation rate was up 98% every single day in Zimbabwe. It was tragic. It was tragic. And so this is one of the reasons why cryptocurrencies exist. Okay, because we know what the limit on supply is going to be for cryptocurrencies. Okay, and most cryptocurrencies are bad investments, but there's a handful that are good longer term. And if we look at one like Bitcoin, which we all know about, there is a limit on the supply of Bitcoin, which is 21 million. 21 million Bitcoins is the maximum number of Bitcoins that can ever be created. And Bitcoin is not regulated by governments. It's regulated by the laws of mathematics. And so there's a dearth, a limit on the supply of 21 million, which is not the same thing when it comes to currencies. So anyway, I hope you have a good understanding now of how interest rates are increased and why they're increased and why they're cut as well, and how Federal Reserve chair people and the ECB and the Bank of Canada, et cetera, are very, very long-term focused, as they should be, in my humble opinion. Now, I told you I would have one more little movie thing in here. See if you can guess what it is. Before I go there, let me first of all say, if this was helpful, and only if this was helpful, please click the like button and subscribe, and I will see you mañana. See if you can guess what this is from. You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.